The webinar today is Revit Room Data Sheets, and thanks for joining. I'm Brianna Ladd, Applications Engineer here at CTC, and excited to share this workflow with you. So we know that there's some powerful data that exists within Revit, and displaying this sometimes in the ways that we want to can be cumbersome or difficult, and maybe not even know how to sometimes. But we're going to look at today creating something like this where you can display some of your data. Room data sheets is what we're calling it, and so it's including some information in there like your furniture items and model numbers, maybe what room name and things like that. All this is capable with just Revit and a couple of tools outside of Revit, one being Excel to kind of format a spreadsheet and add some of formulas in with it, and then the other one would be the add-in to Revit, which is the CTC Express tools. A couple of those we'll be taking a look at. So the problem that we see is that the manual data, or the out-of-the-box way of exporting something like a furniture schedule outside of Revit or out of Revit, and getting that information into something like a spreadsheet is pretty manual. It's tedious. We're human, so it can be error prone, and let's be honest, we just want to automate the process to make it more repeatable and have the best and most accurate results be delivered. So the agenda for today is we're going to take a look at how to set up an Excel room data sheet and using a couple of formulas that we'll take a look at. And then we will also go through the out-of-the-box way of exporting a furniture schedule in a CSV format out of Revit into Excel. And then just kind of look at the differences between utilizing the CSV documents to populate the room data sheet versus the CTC's spreadsheet link tool. And then kind of finally, we'll just bring it into our project, place it on a sheet using the CTC Schedule Excel add-in to bring in that formatted sheet. So a couple of formulas that we're going to be working with today. So the index and match formula, it can be combined into one, but as it stands on its own, the index is useful for retrieving the values at a given location in a list based on a range of cells that you give it, and then given the position. So as you can see, the formula will look something like this down here at the bottom, where you have the equals index, and then you have your range, which is the top of your cell, and then the end of your cell range, and then the comma position, and then the closed brackets. So we can look at this in just a very simple sort of example in an Excel document here. All I've done is just kind of set this up a little bit so that I have a couple of columns for my index. And so if I start in this column and just say index, and then I'm going to put a parentheses and grab my range, and maybe I will look for position 4. Now position 4, it should return the letter D to me, as it does. So it's looking in this cell and then finding what I asked it to match that, or to index that. So the second portion, the match portion, is returning a numeric position in the list. So I'm giving it an exact item to return. So it's going to look in that range and find the exact item based on what I specify in this area. And being that I have the 0 inside the parentheses, this is telling me that I want it to look for an exact match. So this formula will look something like this. We've got the match down here. I've got a string of information, my lookups here, and I will input the formula, something like this, and I want it to match in the quotes, and let's say I want it to find melon and put my comma in there, and I will give it my string of values, my range there, and then make sure again that it gives me the exact value to return, and so it's found it in the 4th cell here. So looking at these two formulas together, the formula is a little bit larger here, and we can match the particular value within the range and return the value where they are aligned. So our formula will look like this: the index and then our range based on the cells in that location, and then it will match the value that I'm looking for. So I'll input my value in the next range, and then once again return an exact value with that 0, and then close my parentheses. So this will look something like this. So we'll say equals, and then the index, and we'll go ahead and do the range here, and we'll say comma, and then match. Let's say we'll look for 4, lucky number 4, in this range of items. And then once again, we want it to give us an exact value, and then close our parentheses. So where it found the 4, it matched it to the word swimming. And then the last portion, this is the if-error formula. So this helps when you want to maybe return a specific value for when it finds an error in the formula. So this will go on the beginning of the formula, and we'll say if error on the beginning of the index and match formula. And then we can say, you know, if error, here's the value. Otherwise, give me this value if it is an error. And you can fill in or populate that with anything. You could do quotes, empty quotes to signify something that's blank, or just nothing. Or you could do something a little bit more kind of where your mind might go, and to look at that cell, you could put in something like populate me, so that you know you need to take a look at that cell and understand why maybe it's not populating. So then we put all the formula together here. That's kind of 3 different pieces of the formula. Again, it will look something like this. So we've got our if error at the beginning, and then at the end of it, and then our index, which is giving us our range. And in this particular example here, it's looking to another sheet, which is kind of how we're going to do it. And then it's matching to a particular cell for an exact lookup value. And then also matching it into the next tab. And in this case, we are just looking at one column. It's going to be column C. In particular to this formula, we'll look at a little bit later on too, where we can say kind of within a range of columns as well. And then that's what this number back here will represent, is the column in particular. So, and then again, looking for an exact match. So, all right, so we'll switch over to Revit here for a demo. And all that I have done so far is just open up a out-of-the-box project. So this is just the sample project, the advanced sample project out of Revit. And I guess I did put in a little bit of data just so that I could have not have so much data input for you guys to watch. So I put things like a type mark into some of my families here that you see in the schedule, and a manufacturer, so that you didn't have to sit and watch me input all that information. But right now I'm going to go ahead and just kind of add some fields to my schedule here, which you're all pretty familiar with. So first of all, I want that type mark to be on top, and then I'll do family type, and we'll do some other fields here and just kind of organize them how I want. And add type, add manufacturer, add type comments, family, and then from my room category here, available fields, I'm going to actually add over room name and room number, because that might be important information that I want to add in there as well. And then add something like project name as a text. Whoops, I already got it in there. Project number. Okay. All right, so I've got my furniture schedule here, a few more columns, and maybe I just do put in some information like a project number. We'll use CTC demo and then today's date. So some of this information in here too. So just the normal out-of-the-box way that we would export this information, like we said, we would go over. So it's just file and then export, and then go down to the reports, and we can export it as a schedule report. And I'll save it out to a location. I've got a furniture schedule here. Again, we said it's going to be TXT formatted, so I'll go ahead and save that. It already exists, so it wants to replace it, that's fine. And then how the export's going to happen, great. So let's see, furniture schedule, this should be it. So we'll take this, we'll open this up and we'll take a look at this TXT formatting. So this is what our schedule exports out as. And this information and dealing with the TXT isn't, you know, the most fun to deal with, and trying to make sense out of this doesn't really make much sense. So what we can do is just open up an Excel document, a blank document, and we can paste this in here, and it does kind of format out pretty nicely. But then, and again, you can do this from this format, but I just wanted to share with you guys today how utilizing it from a CTC tool like like Spreadsheet Link can kind of just make this even a little bit nicer. So what I'm going to do is go in here and fire up my Revit Express tools up here, and that's on this tab here in the green suite. It's one of our kind of powerful tools here, Spreadsheet Link. And the nice thing about it, normally you can build up the category, you can select your category and then build up your parameters of what you want to be reflected in this Spreadsheet Link window back here. The nice thing is that I can drop down this bottom portion down here and select my schedules that already exist in my project. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So there's my schedule, and I'll grab my furniture schedule. And there we go. So it's populating with all this information. I'm going to go ahead and say save. There we go. And then it'll ask me if I want to open it up in the native format that I just saved it in, and that was the XLSX, Excel format, and I'll say yes. And here I've got my data. So then what I will do is next I'm going to add a new sheet to this, and then I'll just go ahead and I will rename this sheet. I'm going to call it, rename this sheet, and I will call it data sheet. And then here is where I'll start to kind of create my data sheet. So the items that I want to include in this data sheet. So some of the things that I thought might be kind of important to include were things like maybe the family, the family or furniture type, maybe the manufacturer, maybe up here you have things like the project number and then the project name. So you just kind of begin to fill out this information with what things you might like to populate on your data sheet. Now over in here, I'm going to create a cell where I can kind of automate this a little bit more. So, and again, a functionality in Excel is this ability to take this cell and from the data tab up here, I can make it use the data validation tool from the data tools panel here. Drop down data validation. Actually, before I do that though, I'm going to make this a little bit easier for myself. I'm going to go back to this Excel document and grab my type marks here, because these are going to be what I put in a list format to kind of make my selection of which furniture sheet or data sheet this sheet is going to be pertaining to. So once again, just so you guys don't have to watch me manually input all this, I'm just going to control copy those things. Come back over here, do the data validation. Come in here, do the data validation, and then on the settings tab from the, oops, one more thing before I do this, sorry. I'm going to create another sheet here and place this in here so that this is my list. This is my list of all those type marks. Sorry, let me grab that again. This is my list of type marks here, and I want it to just be on this list tab. This has nothing to do with kind of what we're doing other than just trying to automate this process a little bit more than having to have you guys watch me manually enter again. So back on this tab, the data sheet, in this cell here, I'm going to do my data validation. And then from the settings tab, I'm going to do this drop down here to make a list. And now I should be able to populate that. And let's see. Okay, well, sorry about that. It doesn't really want me to. So anyway, I would, we'll have to do this a little bit manual here, so apologize for that. But how you would do it is just put in these items in the source, and all you're doing is separating them by a comma. So I'm just grabbing this information just like how I set it up in my type mark in my furniture items themselves and how it's listed. And maybe I won't just do quite all of them, but we'll get a good idea here of what this looks like and how to format this. Okay. And then I would probably give this a header here, something like item, mark, or code, something like that, something to that effect. So that from this drop down here, now I have my item type mark, which relates to which piece of furniture is going to populate these things based on this. So now if I come in here and start kind of populating these fields here, so let's look at something like manufacturer. So going back to our formulas, we're going to start with the index, so equals, then we're going to do index, and we're going to go over to this tab here, and we're going to do the family column row, or the family column, excuse me. And then before I leave this one, I want to put in a comma. And go back to my data sheet. I can take out that data sheet because I don't really need that in there. And then I'm going to say match. And then I'm going to put this cell here, that exact cell. And then I'm going to go back to the furniture column or the furniture schedule tab and select my column C and make sure that I have an exact value. So I'm going to put in my 0 and then close parentheses. Oh, and I think I forgot one parenthesis, so it automatically corrects it there for me. And what did I do wrong? Let's see. Index, furniture schedule, we've got family type and matching that cell. Let's see. Oh, because I didn't there we go, because I didn't pick a code mark here. So as you can see, then my family furniture type populates. That mark value is in regards to the chair here. Let's see if I just swap it out. Some of these we didn't input in, I guess. So that one changes it up. So yeah, there's the index and match formula to find that information from the furniture schedule. The manufacturer one is going to look pretty similar. And then the last portion of what we said was going to be putting the if error on it. So the beginning and the end of it, let's just see if we can't add that if error statement onto it as well. So we'll add the if error and then the index with the closed brackets. And then on the end here, we're going to say, let's see, 3 bracket, and then comma, and then we'll call it, we'll try that populate me phrase that we used, and make sure that that's in quotes and another closed parentheses, and we should be okay. So for that one, then it didn't find the match, so it's going to say populate me. So the kind of same and a little bit simpler formulas for project name and number here. I do have my formulas kind of cheat sheet here. So just a simple index to the previous sheet. In this case, this was done for a different sheet tab named sheet 2 as opposed to furniture schedule, but you would just substitute those out. And then what we looked at here was, this was populate me because I didn't select an actual row within this stretch of the formula. So, but if you're taking screenshots or anything like that, here's some really great formulas to kind of take a look at again. The index, and then the match, and then the if error. That's kind of what we're going for here. And then, so once you kind of make some adjustments to this, get your formulas in, see if this one will populate there with the manufacturer, and we'll look back to the item mark code for HV or HM-V, and let's see, HM-V is the Herman Miller manufacturer. So it's working, which is great. So you can kind of have this as a template. Maybe you put a logo up here and things like that. And then the last and final step, get it looking something like this. So you might have your furniture item populating, your project name populating out, maybe date, where the room is, that information is able to be populated as well. And then the item description. So you can have something like this that's a little bit more nice to look at and presentable. And then the last piece of it would be we'll go back into Revit, and I'll create a sheet here. Okay, so I already have it, but I just created a new sheet, and then my data sheet would be brought on from the schedule Excel. So again, the CTC add-in, and we can just go out and grab our data sheet from wherever we saved it, say open, and go ahead and bring it in. And it looks something like this. There's some formatting and graphic options you can play with on here as well, and just bring it in, say OK, into a scheduling view. Oops, let's just update this one then. And it's already drug onto a sheet, and there we have something that's kind of nicely laid out to look like a room data sheet to include our information here for our manufacturer and our couch item and what room and things like that. So we lost our place here. There we go. So that's kind of all I had today. The conclusions, I guess, hopefully that you drew from this webinar is that manually entering the data, from things like a TXT format to complete information tables can be cumbersome and tedious, and often even mistake prone. Creating some sort of template like a room data sheet using some formulas that are native to Excel, and maybe using some add-ins like our CTC Express tools to more automate this information can be more easily displayed and allow you to give kind of the presentation of these items that you want to. Do keep yourselves in tune to upcoming sessions. So on Thursday of this week, there's Mechanical Equipment Configurator. Next week, it looks like on Tuesday, there's Introduction to AutoCAD Plant 3D. And then later on next week, mini training on arrays in Revit families, how-tos, tricks, and tips. So tune into those. We thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your time.